Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. I'm Marwan Makan, President of the FCCT and correspondent for the Interpress Service News Agency. This evening's panel discussion is the first of a whole series of panels and events we've planned leading up to the general election next door on November 7th. A couple of announcements. Tomorrow at 12 noon, there's a press conference by the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. It's an assessment on 1 year after this regional body was set up. And it seems like the intergovernmental body's treatment of Burma probably will be one of the most key issues. Then on Thursday, there's a press conference for Asian People's Solidarity. It's also around ASEAN. Tuesday, November 2nd, there's a press conference on Burma's election, examining the wider political realities. And on Thursday, we're fortunate to have Ambassador Andrew Hein, the British ambassador in Myanmar, to come and speak to us and give his assessment of how things are leading up to this general election. Andrew Hein has met Aung San Suu Kyi and has been rather candid in some of his observations when interviewed by the British media. This evening is a special and an important event hosted by the FCCT. When we heard that Robert Kelly was heading towards our region, we extended an invitation to him to come and speak at the club in light of his newfound fame. Revealing just what exactly was happening inside Burma and then the general's plans to establish a nuclear program. Robert Kelly, revealed much of this when he submitted his views to a groundbreaking program by the Democratic Voice of Burma. He's a nuclear engineer with over 30 years experience. He and his wife were among a number of people who shared the Nobel Peace Prize that was given to the IAEA, so that's wonderful to have you. He will be speaking to us this evening. He'll give a PowerPoint presentation on his take on what he noticed and what his views are on where Burma's nuclear program is heading. Joining him on the panel are two very important personalities who, as commentators, have been very much candid about their views on politics in Burma. We have Dr.Maung Zarni speaking to the club at the club for the first time. He's a Burmese activist and scholar attached to the London School of Economics. He's currently affiliated with ISIS and at the Chulalongkorn University, but previously, while based in Burma, we would see him on the BBC. He writes regularly for the Irrawaddy, and he's certainly an outspoken critic. And finally, we have a friend of the club, Kavi Chongkitawon, a columnist for The Nation. Kavi has been one of the few people among the Thai media who exposed this story rather early on in the day and has raised questions about what ASEAN is planning to do in light of Burma's new challenge to the region. So without much further ado, let me invite Robert Kelly to begin his presentation. He will be followed by Zarni and then Kavi. Robert, thanks.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the invitation to speak to FCCT. This is a really good thing for me. It's my first visit to Thailand, and I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm a technical person, and so this is a technical briefing with technical slides. and it is my view of what it is that I have seen, and I'm going to go through it in quite a bit of detail. I'm not a politician or a political scientist, and so when it comes to question time, I'll be very happy to answer questions. If they delve too far into policy, you'll find that I just won't be able to answer them. Okay, thank you. I'll run through the slides here and give you a feeling for how this development came about. I could say the first thing is that I began working on the Burma nuclear issue seriously about January of last year, and I've worked on this very hard with other people, a lot of it by myself, and I've done a lot of research that goes beyond this at this point. But this is primarily a summary of what we learned about the nuclear program, largely through one person who kind of unlocked other things that we needed to know. Definitely Burma has a small program. They acknowledge a little bit with the IAEA. They say it's focused mostly on medical activities, using isotopes for hydrology, that kind of thing. But they do receive a fair amount of funding from IAEA, on the order of a little over $500,000 a year for this nuclear program. Some of it is used for training people to do things like build reactors. They have this agreement for a small reactor with Russia. I would say, as clearly as I know how, I don't think that deal was ever consummated. And so no matter how many open source reports you read that say that they have this small reactor, it does not seem to have happened, and I'll go into that in more detail. One reason that they don't have the reactor is that Burma has some very obsolete agreements with the IAEA. And the IAEA has no objections to Burma working on in the nuclear industry. They think it's just fine if they tell the truth about everything, if they disclose everything they have, and they use their agreements. Well, the agreements are so old and they're so out of date that they no longer bind Burma. And the Russians know that, and the Russians are not going to sell anything to somebody who hasn't signed up-to-date agreements. We know a lot about the clandestine activity in the sense there have been a lot of source reports, and I started reading those primarily at DVB, and then I started doing my own research, things like Desmond Ball, of course. And as I looked at that, I wasn't very convinced by them, but one of the things that struck me was there's a lot of jargon in the source reporting. These are not the everyday sources who say to you, well, I have a cousin who lives over that hill, and he gets sick, and it must be a nuclear reactor. It's not that kind of stuff. There's jargon, and there's mention of things that are going on that really get your attention if you're a nuclear engineer. And so when Cy Win came out as a well-placed defector, it suddenly started to fall into place. Now, Cy reminds me of Mordecai Vanunu. If you remember Vanunu, 1986, he went to London. He had a lot of pictures from Israel, pictures of Dimona that he had taken down in the basement, pictures of the lithium separation, etc. These are some of the pictures that were published in the Sunday Times. And you may remember that Mordecai Vanunu was kidnapped, abducted, in a nice case where he met a blonde lady who talked him into getting on a plane, and unfortunately never came back. So we're hoping that Cy doesn't do the same thing. This is Cy in the factory in Burma. In the case on the left, he's holding an impeller that he's manufactured for a liquid-fueled missile. This was a training project that he had. It's not necessarily clear that this relates to an actual missile. On the right is some nuclear equipment that I'm going to talk about in more detail. Cy brought pictures, as did Vanunu, and Cy's pictures are actually a little easier to document and to discover that they're real. Vanunu, I don't remember anybody really questioning that the pictures came from Dimona. They accepted it. In Cy's case, we can say the pictures that he has taken, and I mean that in more than one way, some that he has snapped and some that he has stolen, were taken inside factories that we know from other sources. He's a 34-year-old Army major, a mechanical engineer, not a nuclear engineer. He has a missile certificate that he got at Bauman after graduating from DSTA. He was a deputy manager of these special factories. We're going to talk about those quite a bit, so I'll give you some background on them. And he was briefed on the nuclear program, not because he was a major, but because he was an aide to some general officers. And so he went to a couple of major briefings for those general officers where they were briefing Tan Shui and Moai about the nuclear program and what it was about. And in those briefings, the word to the general officers was, we, the government, want a nuclear bomb. We want you to build a reactor so we can do it. We want you to enrich uranium. we want you to build a bomb. That's what he heard. Now, if I heard that from the average source who walks in the door and doesn't give me anything else, I would give it a fairly low degree of credibility. And in fact, we heard a lot of other sources walk through the door and say something like that, but they had nothing to corroborate. In this case, he worked in the special machine tool factories, and that's going to give him a lot of credibility. I hope you'll agree in the next few minutes. The machine tool factories were purchased by the Ministry of Science and Technology of Burma, purchased from Germans primarily through Singapore divisions of some German companies. They built special buildings to hold the machines, and they brought in these very large machines, which I'm going to show you. The Germans were concerned, and I'll go into that in more detail later, but they asked for end user visits, and that's one of the reasons we can see that he was in the right place. He brought things like documents, lots and lots of color photos. You'll see a good sample of those. Mechanical drawings, some documents, and again, that kind of reminds you of Vanunu. Now, if you're an engineer and you were sitting a little closer to the screen, the first thing you'd probably say is, that's a pretty lousy mechanical drawing. And that's going to figure into my assessment of this program, is the people who made this drawing didn't put any tolerances on it. They didn't put other things that you would expect on a mechanical drawing. It's enough to make this component. It's certainly not enough to make a precision component. And it indicates that the people who made the drawing and the people who made the part are not communicating very well and not behaving professionally. These tools that we mentioned that came from Germany, I want to make it really clear. We are not saying the Germans did something wrong. In fact, the Germans did something right. They allowed the tools to go. There were export licenses for some of them, but I think they were very nervous about what it was they were selling, who they were selling it to, and what it was for. And there were some mistakes made, I'm quite sure. But the bottom line is the Germans demanded end-user inspections. And so the Germans have been to the factories that we're going to see in these photographs on 3 occasions and have been there and taken pictures that we, in fact, can look at as well. This, for me, is one of the greatest reasons why Sai has credibility for me, because I know he was there. I really know he was there. I can see that he was there. I can see him in the pictures. I can see what he's doing, and then I can see other examples of the same places. The idea that this is for vocational training, you'll see in a couple of minutes, is questionable. We also know that Sai was there from the picture on the left, which is a ground photograph of what we call Factory 2 near Miang. That picture and many others we have of the factory under construction are fairly recognizable. The picture on the right is a satellite image. I think I could convince you with just very little work it's the same building. That's nice imagery that we got, and I'd like to thank Jane's and Jane's Intelligence Review for supporting us in imagery for some of the analysis that we're doing. Jane's has been very good about getting us very high resolution imagery on short notice. I use Google Earth several times a day, but Jane's gives me things when we can't find it other ways. So we know that there's the factory. He took the one on the left. I think he stole that picture, and the picture on the right's from the satellite. Just in case you think we're talking about, your downstairs workshop kind of tools, these are big. Many of the tools they're building are 2 or 3 stories high, and they are in environmentally controlled rooms. You can't make precision parts in a room in a humid country where the temperature is out of control and the humidity is out of control. You actually have to put the machine tool itself in its own room inside the building. And I think you can see the building is just a simple metal roof, no insulation, and there's no air conditioning as far as we can see. So each one of these units is air conditioned. Some of the machines are smaller, but this is just to give you a feeling for the size of them. The 2 factories, by the way, Factory 1 and Factory 2, I showed you number 2, are identical as far as we can tell. They're the same size, and we are told that they have the same equipment for all practical purposes inside the buildings. So they're duplicates of each other, which is strange in its own way.